sorry, not. But like, why are we convinced that they're low risk? Why isn't it possibly just they're on the the tail end of the distribution? They're just the guys that happen to get lucky and happen to not get injured, happen to not have any sort of like minor ailment throughout the whole year, and they're just the guys that it happened to happen for. And next year, they are maybe going to get banged up, or like how do we know? Like, where's the proof that those guys are actually low risk?
Well, then it brings my next point, talking about pitchers. How many pitchers this year pitched over 200 innings? I see a hand over there. Got a 4 from Justin Mason there, who is correct. The answer is 4. I'm sure you can name them also. Zach Wheeler, Walker Buehler, Sandy Alcantara, who's going to be, I think, overpriced next year, and Adam Wainwright. Who had Adam Wainwright at over 200 innings this year?
Yeah.
Nobody. So if you wanted to take a risk and draft Adam Wainwright, you got lucky. Pitchers, I think it's a different animal because pitchers get a lot injured more often than hitters do. So I think it's a different animal when it comes to this type of consistency.
Yeah, there are other types of risk other than health. That's which one risk we're talking about. One risk that I think is easier to see is categorical risk, portfolio risk. To take the very, very strict case, Adalberto Mondesi. The reason why last year I was totally off him, do not buy him. And it wasn't because, I didn't believe his projection. It wasn't because, I really thought that he's really injured, which it is the case. But it's the risk to your portfolio from an outside source. So if you drafted Mondesi, you must have banked on like 40 or 50 steals, right? You're not drafting him and then say, well, you know what, I got to draft a lot more speed. You went for power elsewhere because I got Mondesi, right? The problem with drafting him is now, if he's injured, and there's a percentage chance for that, what happens to your portfolio? Your steals crater. I mean, did anybody here actually draft Mondesi? Yeah, and
yes.
Can you tell me what happened to your steals after that? Struggled all year, right? It's an outsized player. Whereas players who are more even across the board in categories have less of an effect. If you've heard the show, I was always a big proponent of Alex Verdugo, Mark Hanna, Xander Bogaerts. I'm naming guys from the top and bottom. Bo Bichette, all the way up top, because they do something in every category. It doesn't crash your portfolio. It means you're still, yes, if you lost Bichette, you lost a valuable player, but you're not searching for, it's one source. I need a specific type of player to fill in. You don't have that. Mark Hanna is even better because, he's low down. You can still replace him for somewhat value, and it can be from any source. And guys like I always remember like Alex Gordon used to play Alexei Ramirez. They always had a very stable. They had some steals. They had some power. And you know what? If they had a bad year in power, maybe they had a better year in batting average or a better year in steals. Right? Many paths to value is a lower risk category. And I think that when you're seeing players who are spread across the board in terms of categorical risk, that's another type of risk, and that should be priced into your portfolio. Bo Bichette, how about a question for the audience? I'm going to give you 2 players. Who would you take in the first round of next year? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., okay? Vlad. Oh, my God, Vlad. Or Bo Bichette. Raise your hand if you would rather draft Bo Bichette. Raise your hand if you're Vlad. All right, 50-50. Derek, what would you do?
Whichever one the projections end up liking more.
Good answer.
Ruben?
I would take Bo Bichette.
I would probably take Bichette,
yeah.
But maybe for a different reason than you would.
Okay, what's the reason?
The reason is because I don't want to take a corner infielder that high.
Okay.
But
that's
where
different.
you're going with the category thing, which I think is valid too. But if Vlad, projects $5 higher or $10 higher, like just in a vacuum, if those are my only 2 choices, I'd take Vlad.
And we had Bo Bichette on almost every single one of our teams this year. We had either Bo Bichette or Marcus Semien on all our teams this year. So we love that profile. That's the best possible profile. You want a stable player in the first round? Juan Soto almost completely duplicated his 2019 season this year. Almost completely. A little less stolen bases, but otherwise the same. And Whit Merrifield, he's close to the league lead in hits every single year. Why would you not want that on your roster?
Yeah. Let's talk about another risk of replacement level risk. So the question is, how high would you draft? And we did a little bit of this on our prior show. Salvador Perez, right? Fantastic player. He hit 48 homers or so, and he's going to be DHing a lot. So he played a lot of games. I have no problem with him. How high would you go for Salvador Perez next year? Can you draft him in the third round? Is it too high to draft a catcher? Well, what are your thoughts on the risk? The question, of course, the risk is if your catcher gets hurt, then the replacement level of him is so bad. You're getting a really crappy catcher. If your corner infielder gets hurt, well, there are some pickings down below. It's not a big drop. So there's more risk in drafting a catcher a little bit higher than you think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess risk doesn't come into it as much for me. There's risk taking anyone in fantasy baseball. It's baseball. Guys get hurt. Things happen. Things play out differently than you expect them to. Guys overperform. Guys underperform. Risk is unavoidable. Yeah, maybe there's ways you can mitigate it. I'm not confident in my abilities to accurately assess risk. Again, I think a lot of times when we think about risk, we treat noise as signal. We think we're assessing risk when really we're just assessing noise. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, catchers, obviously, this is kind of a different thing. I don't know. I mean, really what it comes down to for me is where the value is. If I don't think Salvador Perez is going to come at any kind of discount next year, so I'm sure I'm not going to be in on Salvador Perez. But if there's a high-end catcher that is going to come at a discount, I'm not going to necessarily avoid him just because he's a high-end catcher, and if he gets hurt, then I have to replace him with someone bad. Like, if he's a value, he's a value.
Okay.
And getting a player at value during the draft is the wrong thing. You have to try to get them under the value so you get a profit. Because if you get a player at value, you're going to lose out getting profit later on, and that's not the way to do it. You want to get the highest on your board that you think is going to get the most profit at that time. If Salvador Perez is equal at that time, you're not going to get the profit, and it's not worth it.
Yeah. Let's talk about ace pitchers who just maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, if you picked a pitcher in the first round, you'd be like, okay, this ain't like picking a kicker. It's like picking a kicker in football. Hey, you got to wait on that. They're too risky. You don't pick them until the third round, maybe for Kershaw. You go to the second round, maybe first round. But now the case is that, at least, well, you tell me if this is true, but the case is that an ace is the way to go, that they're actually less risky, that their return on investment, when you spend the money, you're actually going to hold quite a lot of value. I did some research on just pitcher strikeouts, and the pitchers in the first 4 rounds, they were the highest strikeout pitchers of the league. Sure, there were some 200 strikeout pitchers sprinkled down, but you wanted strikeouts. You needed a pitcher in the first round. I know Batflip crazy Toby Gavon, he picks 2 pitchers in the first 2. Obviously, his risk assessment is that's the way to go. I'm not going to take mid-level pitchers as risks. I'll take the darts down below, and who cares? There's always a return on a free quantity, but I'm taking those pitchers up. What's your sense in the whole pitchers in the first, second round?
Yeah, I've been saying for years that pitchers get underdrafted, and the market, I think, has gotten a lot more efficient over the last year or two, and people have started to take pitchers in the first round where they belong. If you run projections and valuations at the start of the year, the last few years, basically, probably 2 or 3 of the top 5 most valuable, in terms of preseason projected value players have been pitchers. Like last year, Jacob deGrom projected far and away, I think, by pretty much any reasonable projection system or method, as the guy you should take as the first pick, in the draft. And some guys did that. So yeah, I think I have no problem taking a pitcher in the first round. I think pitchers are injury prone and too risky, and you just got to take someone safe in the first round. Well, how'd that work out for the guy who drafted Ronald Acuna or Mike Trout? Or like safe isn't a thing. If you're playing for safety, you're playing to lose. So I don't agree with that philosophy. I like taking pitchers early. That being said, I do think there's a big difference between the truly elite pitchers, like the top 3 or 4 guys. Every year it's going to be a little bit different, and that next tier, that tier 2 and tier 3 a lot of times that tier gets overdrafted, I feel like, and I don't want to be part of that. I want one of the real elite guys.
And the main thing is to get one. I don't think two works
Yeah.
because if you go look at the ADP from last year, the top 10 ADP starters from last year, 7 out of 10 had 30 games started, and 10 to 20 ADP from last year, 4 out of 10 had 30 games started. That means it's a coin flip whether these guys are actually going to get you the numbers that you need. So one starter is good, one ace is good. Which one it is, every year is different. You can pick Garrett Cole, and he's healthy. He's healthy now, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be healthy soon. Lance McCullers, he's healthy. He's doing great in the playoffs. He's now not in the ALCS. He has a forearm strain. He had an MRI. They said they're not worried. What does that mean for next year? I have no idea. Are you going to draft him early on? Is he going to be your second guy? You can draft him in the second round. You can draft him in the third round. You can draft him in the fourth round. What's his value going to be?
Yeah, I found that, and when I ran my numbers on the return per round per player, so for starting pitchers, the average return in the first round was like $19 for a pitcher, $17 for the second round, fourth round $16, then it drops $8 minus in the sixth round this year. There's a huge drop off in the first 4 rounds to the rest, and then there's just a whole lull in the middle until you get to some darts down by the 20th round, the 23rd round, 24th round. Because those return on investments are going to be a lot higher. You're putting up $1, $3, and yet they're returning something. But the whole middle, I found, is really barren. So the case for at least an ace is the way to go. Here's an interesting question for you. Are you better off playing in one league drafting two of the ace pitchers, or are you better off playing in 2 leagues drafting one? Right? Which is the better way to spread your risk? Play in multiple leagues or pick 2 in the same league? That's an interesting question, right?
I don't know if I understand the question.
Well, I mean, let's say you're an NFBC player, all right? Can you, if you play in one league and you do the pocket aces and take 2 in the first 3 rounds,
okay.
Or you could say, you know what, I want to try a different strategy. I'm going to play in 2 NFBC leagues, just do 1 ace in one and 1 ace in the other. Which do you think is more beneficial?
I would think the second approach. I don't think it's necessarily like a spreading the risk thing or anything like that. I just think that's the sounder approach. I think you're going to get the better value doing it that way. So that's the way I do it.
But
Yeah.
I also think it matters where you're drafting. If you're drafting early in the first round, I think you may be better off getting a hitter. It may be a little bit quote unquote safer. If you're drafting later in the first round, beginning of the second round, you want to around the turn, you want to get an ace there. That's probably the place to get it because you can get a hitter and a pitcher, so that you have less risk when it comes to get that starting pitcher.
And it's all going to depend on the way rankings are stratified any given year, where you're picking. Like, you're not going into the first round saying, okay, no matter where I'm picking, I'm going to take a pitcher because I listened to the Beat the Shift podcast and those guys said I got to take a pitcher in the first round. Like, no, like if the best player on the board is a hitter, take the freaking hitter.
Yeah,
100%.
But don't be afraid of taking the pitcher if he is the most valuable guy on the board.
Yeah. Want to talk, you mentioned a little bit about auction and about corner infield. Before we talk a little bit about that, want to get your take on the general concept of spread the risk in an auction versus stars and scrubs. Stars and scrubs is where you take a $40 player and you take a $1 player at the bottom, versus spread the risk is more 2020. We actually had a mailbag question from MVP Nacho who asked something very similar. What's your thought on the approach in auctions, and does it differ for hitters versus pitcher in the strategy?
I think it differs based on a number of different factors. I think it depends on the type of league that you're in, the depth of the league, and it depends on the way your league mates approach the auction and the way kind of market dynamics evolve throughout the draft. So like if you're in a deep league, an AL-only league, an NL-only league, it's a lot tougher to get away with stars and scrubs because your scrubs are a lot of times are guys that, they're going to play once a week, or they might be starting in the minors. Like, you might be rostering dead spots. And so that doesn't work in a league like that. In a mixed league where scrubs are guys who are actually going to be playing every day or semi-regularly, then I think that has a little bit more, of value to it. And I think it depends too on market dynamics. If the league is drafting, very efficiently, and the guys that you're buying for $1 or $2 are actually worth, $1, $2